Welcome to Nerd Taku Podcast, where we watch it so you don't have to. I'm going to be hosting today's show. I'm Ben.
And I'm Eli.
This week, we'll be reviewing the 1987 film Hamburger Hill. With us, we have a special guest joining us. His name is Josh. How's it going, man?
Oh, what's up? It's going good. How are you guys?
Doing pretty well. We're definitely happy to be here.
Yep, same. Happy to be here.
Spoiler warnings are ahead. Eli, my man, are there spoilers in this film?
It's a review show, my dude. There's going to be spoilers in every episode.
That is 100% true. Director is John Irvin. Our main cast, Michael Boatman, Dylan McDermott, Don Cheadle, and Steven Weber. So this film received a 6.7 on IMDb. The synopsis for this film is a very realistic interpretation of one of the bloodiest battles of the Vietnam War. Pretty simplistic synopsis there, but true to its word, it is a very real interpretation of this battle. We're going to start with the ratings that we gave it. I gave it a 4.5. Eli?
I gave an overall 4.25.
And Josh, what did you give it?
I went with an 8.75. I know that's pretty high for you guys, but I'm a war fanatic, history fanatic, and I'll tell you why while we go through all this.
Pretty different opinions of nature on this one, so this will be a fun review up in here. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with plot.
I gave plot a 0.5.
I gave plot a 1 because I mean there's not much more than what history can tell of what the past was.
I went with Eli as well. I also gave it a 0.5. So let's go ahead and start with Josh since he gave the higher rating. Let's hear why he gave plot a 1.
I gave it a 1 because historically you can't change history. There's no, I mean, a plot is in the movie when it's a historically true and accurate is more, I like, what can you add? What can you subtract? Not a whole lot. It is what it is and it was what it was. So a 1 because this movie was accurate on its history.
Okay, all right. Very well understood. It's true. Very accurate. There's just a few things that I would add to why I dropped the plot, but I'll go ahead and pass the mic to Eli and see what his opinion is.
We can't discredit the fact that this is like based on a real life battle and it's a big tragedy that happened. A lot of lives were lost. A lot of lives were very injured and impacted for the rest of their lives due to this battle. But the beginning was so slow. I understood the details that they were trying to give. Like at one point during the plot, they tried to explain the whole filling out your medical information, your benefits, but was that really necessary to show the real, like the nitty gritty, the full, every ounce of detail of like paperwork and this and I'm like, you need your shoes, you need to brush your teeth for a minute, and it's like I just felt like there was a lot of stuff there that was not really needed for telling the story of this battle because the battle didn't start until 40 minutes in. So I thought the battle had a good pacing. It was very, very well done. I just felt the beginning they could have cut some out and still gotten their point across.
I have to agree with you. There were quite a few plot points that were, or details that were put into the plot that took your focus away from the main plot. Brushing your teeth, going to the brothel. There were just so many side stories that took your focus off of the main plot. Story's an amazing when it finally gets to the story. The film has so much filler that it's hard to focus on the plot itself. The plot of this movie is trying to give the rendition of what happened during Hamburger Hill. If I wasn't doing this story for the podcast itself, it would have been turned off within 30 minutes. It was really, really rough. It's not until the last 30 minutes of the film that you actually get into the real battle itself, when things are starting to intensify, when you're seeing soldiers die, fight, bleed, try to save each other, get up to the top of the hill. It's just, there's so much going on in the first hour and a half of this, but that it takes all of your focus away from the main plot of this story, and it's just really hard to keep on trucking, keep on watching, because there's just a lot that doesn't have anything to do with why this film was put out. It was put out to portray all of the hurt and heartache and struggle that these soldiers have during this battle, but before that happens, you got to get to meet the characters. I understand that. You got to get to meet the soldiers. And with how much sidetracking there was throughout the beginning of this film, it really took your focus away from the main plot line. Acting.
I gave acting a 0.5.
I also give it a 0.5.
0.5s all around. That was the general synopsis of this one. Let's go ahead and start with Eli.
You can feel the inexperience in this acting cast that they brought in. The most experienced actor was Sergeant Dennis, with 6 films under his belt. Majority of these guys, like Sergeant Adams and a couple of the privates, this was their first film they've ever were in. And you can see it. You could see them having these long stares, and like the lines were just not really there. Some people over exaggerated too much, and it almost became a little bit of an animalistic type acting, like the Doc. He became super aggressive, and he tried to play in that role of the stereotypical 60s where people portrayed African Americans as loud and rowdy, and that's what he played. And to be honest, these guys are actually very nice, well-mannered gentlemen. So I just felt the acting was not there for the stellar cast it became after the years. It wasn't really a strong point of the film.
I'm going to have to agree on some of that stuff. But for me, it wasn't. I liked Doc personally because he portrayed what the typical Vietnam soldier went through. Just because the things that you see during war, the things that he saw and experienced, and everything's when it comes to him particularly, I thought he was a pretty strong character. He was inexperienced, but he was a strong character, and I think he grew because of that, right? Like what he saw and stuff like that. Personally, I don't know, like when you're going through intense battles and seeing your friends die and stuff like that, I thought he did the acting really well.
I agree with you there, like with the situation of how to deal with the extremes of the Vietnam War. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with Doc.
I have to put my point around the same as Eli. Courtney B was just, I feel like, too inexperienced to play the part that they wanted him to play. Doc was one that you could try to connect with. Just the way that Courtney B had delivered his character, I don't feel like he had the necessary experience needed for said character. I think that placing Courtney B in Private Johnny's role probably would have been a better fit, just because I feel like Don Cheadle delivered Private Johnny really well and probably could have played Doc in a better perspective than what Courtney B could. It kind of, I feel like it hurt the film to have Dennis, as powerful as he was, with this cast of inexperienced people. He outacted all of them. He was very powerfully put, had strong quotes, was there to support Adam most of the way through. It was just a lot that outshined the rest of the cast that hurt the film pretty much to its core. The story was able to be delivered, but with how strong his performance was, it outshined everybody else who were 0 to 2 films into their career. It wasn't a very well balanced cast. It hurt a lot. That is why, in my opinion, the acting was not fully up to par, not where it could have been. More experienced actors been side by side with Weber, but I guess you work with what you can.
I'm gonna have to agree with you there, but yeah, I think you're right, and that's why I gave it a 0.5, is because there were weak actors in this, but overall, like having a bunch of new cast, right, new to the game of acting, it's gonna be a lower acting film.
I think with the point you had with Courtney, I think the reason why Courtney was picked for the role was because back in Vietnam, I don't believe personally that they would have had a lot of field medics that would have been African American. I think they wanted to portray that the white man had to rely on the African American gentleman to help him like save their life. Like they wanted to show that portrayal of, because this is when segregation was a thing, black and white was still a problem. And I think that's why Courtney was picked. And because of how loud he was, I thought he overdid it a bit, but I understood why he was chosen for the role as Doc.
Which makes sense. I'm just saying that I think that Cheadle could have still portrayed that in a better way just because of the way he delivered Private Johnny. It was just a better touch to it. And I feel like that if their roles were reversed, it could have boosted the acting, even though they were pretty new to the game. It still could have boosted it by putting him in the role of Johnny and Cheadle in the role of Doc. I mean, you got to work with what you got. It's a new cast. Like almost everybody is new. So, unfortunately, because of that, the film is going to suffer because they're all working to bring out this character to, get future roles. This is their start. This is their debut. And the only way for that to work is try to match an experienced actor, and that's probably what they were trying to do when they were trying to meet and match with Weber, but they couldn't quite do it, and so the film suffered in and of itself.
Agreed.
I agree with that.
Character development.
I went with a 0.75.
I went with a 0.5.
Ooh, mine was a 0.25. I guess we'll start with the high. Josh, why'd you give it a 0.75?
Personally, I think everybody grew, honestly, even before they died. Because you think about it. If you're with, as horrible as Vietnam was, and I've heard from stories from a lot of different veterans, that the psychological damage that it did, whether it was growing down or growing up, it could have went both ways for anybody. But the PTSD that they got from this war, I think that most of the characters grew because not only that were they, it was the segregation thing, but every time they went to, release themselves from the battle, from this 4 or 5 day battle retreat, right? And every time they retreated, they got defeated morally. Like they got defeated, like their morale was down, right? Because they needed to take this hill. Because if they didn't take this hill, they couldn't progress and they couldn't get on top of the Viet Cong. But once they hit the top of the hill, everybody's morale just was like, well, fuck, we did all that. Now look how many of my buddies were lost. And on top of that, they're like, well, Jesus, like I could have died, There were so many times where I almost died, and then you'd see, and then so many got wounded and such. But Washington didn't care. When they were hearing things back from Washington saying, "Oh, they can't take it. They can't take this hill. They're not going to." Then they're like, "Fuck you. We're gonna take this hill, and we're gonna go. We're gonna do this." And they did. After the 5th attempt, they finally took it. So I think they all grew just because, if they didn't die, I think they all grew because they're all like, well, nobody gives a shit about color. Because at the end, they're like, you're my brother. You'll always be my brother, kind of thing. Like the segregation stopped between the soldiers, all of them. They fought a little bit every time they came back from getting defeated on the hill, but ultimately, I think they all grew.
You know, you make a valid point on how in war the development is through combat and through loss and bloodshed. And like at the end of the film, you see only 3 remaining out of that whole platoon. And that's a statement by itself that war is not a small thing to scoff at. It's a big, challenging obstacle that we as humans put on ourselves. And these guys do that in the mental strain it takes. There's a lot of regression toward in war. Some people never become the same. And you see Sergeant Adam, he came out at the end. He was like this big guy. Like you see in the beginning, he was in the brothel with his buddy Dennis, and they were just having a good time. And then by the end of the film, you just see him broken. You see a man who saw everything you could think of in a combat scenario. He lost Doc as he was dying there, bleeding out of his abdomen, just lost him. You see everyone but Don Chino's character and one other private in his platoon survive. And yeah, I kind of agree with you there that the development is pretty strong throughout the whole platoon, but it's more focused on seeing the last remaining one survive. I think Dennis had one of the strong ones with his speech at the end, where he was like talking about his family and giving this big monologue, and then life ended shortly for him. But yeah, I do agree with you that war does make development.
I had to go with a 0.25 because yes, they got defeated and got back up. Got defeated and got back up. But throughout it was mainly just getting past the segregation. There wasn't a whole lot of personal development per soldier. It was just the group itself came together more and more as the film developed, as they went through segregation, like you said, had quit. But that is basically all there was. There wasn't a whole lot of personal growth, or that's the main thing right there. There wasn't a lot of personal growth per soldier. They did get defeated, they did get back up, but that was through orders. They had to continue, they had to keep going, they had to push. There wasn't anything that stuck out per one soldier. It was as a full platoon, all of them developed in the sense that they finally got camaraderie and trusted each other and needed that segregation to die, which it did. I will bring mine up to a 0.5, but still, just because there wasn't any personal growth in any of the soldiers, I got a 0.5 is where I can justify it. I can't really go any higher than that.
Well, I have to agree with you. There's no personal one for every soldier, but I think that's what they're trying to portray, though, right? Because this is a movie of war. This was a movie of like coming together, kind of like, you know, you get those movies that are like football teams that are the underdogs and then they kick ass, right, at the end of the movie. And that's like pretty much every single sport, right? But we didn't win the Vietnam War. We shouldn't have even been in the Vietnam War, period. So for them to come across and defeat segregation at that time, and I don't think the director or the movie was based on one single soldier, though. It was a whole group of soldiers. That's where I'm coming from with this one. Just because, you know, I don't know, like it wasn't about, how there's movies on like somebody is from the Bronx or whatever, grew up poor, and it's not about one person or like 3 people. It's about a whole platoon. Not just any platoon, guys, but the 101st Screaming Eagles. Those guys are badass.
I get that. Understandable. That's what the story wanted to focus on, but it did put a lot of emphasis on Sergeant Adam and Sergeant Dennis. a lot of emphasis on both of them. Dennis, his character was pretty solid throughout. He was always the hype man and the booster for Adam. Adam didn't have a lot of progression just because he was the sergeant. He needed to give orders, get his men where he could, and multiple of his men ended up perishing, unfortunately. But he himself didn't have a lot of progression. And this film did focus on a platoon, but it had a ton of focus on Adam and Dennis themselves. And just not enough development between those two characters to really push out a high character development in this film itself. Sound and music.
0.5.
0.5.
Man, y'all is generous. I gave that a 0.
I'm going to have to, I was going to go with a 0.25, but I went with a 0.5 just because of the accurate sounding of bullets whizzing by the head, by just even the smallest things. But the explosions themselves and having the phantoms coming in, dropping the napalm and the bombs and stuff like that, it was all accurate. But I had to bring it down to a 0.25 or a 0.5 just because that I remember two parts when they were going up the hill, and it was the craziest, weirdest, dumbest fucking music, right? I hated that. And there was only two. But as for the sound effects, that's why I gave it a 0.5, is because they were accurate. And I was going to go with a 7.25 just with the sound effects, but I didn't know how to split that up. So I went with a 0.5. Yeah, the music was bad, but the action was correct.
I agree with you there. The sound of like guns going off, napalm, it was really like well done. That music, I don't get it. That music was just horrendous. Going up the hill, all of a sudden, where's the noise? Hello? Going up the hill, no noise. Like after the music just cuts randomly. It's like the mixing for the music could have been done so much better. And I get they went with 60s music. I get it. But to be honest, there were a lot of good songs that came out in the 60s that they could have used in this film than some of the ones they picked. And I have to say, the music really killed it. And I gave it a 0.5.
I was not generous at all with this one. Sound of Music got a 0 straight up for me. There was nothing. I'm sorry, but I felt like the bombing, the effects were good. The effects were pretty fun. But you hear the shots go off, you hear the bombings go down. All I hear is like someone took a free software like GarageBand mixer and put it into a film. I did not feel like anything given off was authentic. It felt like I was watching a cartoon show. Sound effects, music-wise especially, there are literally 2 to 3 music scenes in this. The first one that I remember is them on the helicopter going towards the battle. I don't know what the hell that music was. It didn't set a mood. It didn't set a tone. It was just played. It was just something to overshadow the sound of the helicopters as they're flying into battle. Then they get to battling the hill. You both have already mentioned this. It gets intense, but it's not matching the scene. The music just does not match what they're trying to portray during this film. It had no place. There was no reason for it to be there. And it goes, cuts out. And then someone's on a radio and then they're talking and then they start trudging back up the hill. It starts back up again. Same tone, same music. Has nothing to do with how strong they want to make this film feel. And it's terrible. It's horrid. I can't put anything onto Sound of Music. It felt like a high school production. It felt like I was watching a high school production, and that it just had a 0. I felt nothing from sound, from music. Nothing pulled me in. Nothing attracted me into this with any type of sound effects. I wanted to turn it off. It was bad. I'm sorry, it was
Look, I
bad.
totally understand. I totally get where you're coming from, but this is 1980 fucking 7. This is the year I was born. This is the day that I came out of my mom's vag. Come on, man. Like, seriously. Like, I understand, but where you're coming with the music, and I totally agree. But the sound effects, they didn't have a whole lot. Obviously they have to get it from a different source, right? But and not having computers and shit like that back then, like how can you do that? They had to work around a lot of stuff. Because go back in history with filmmaking, and none of it's live. There's, like what can you do? Or like I don't know. I don't feel like you're giving it due credit where the effects come in.
Okay, but like you have tons of different films that came out around the same time. You know, you have Lion of the Desert, you have Sea Wolves, Dogs of War, Die Hard. All these different films had just as much sound effects and just as much explosions as what this film did. And all of them sound better than what I heard in this film. It was tragic. It was a tragedy. I'm sorry. I could not get attached to it. You know what? To appease the crowd, I can raise it to a 0.25, but I cannot justify any higher than that. It was just horrid.
You got to remember one thing about this. The budget for this film to get helicopters, just a helicopter in general, probably cost a third of their budget. Like the movie was $6 million in budget. So may as well have to cut a couple corners, and music was one of them. But sound effects wise, it wasn't the worst. It wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst because you're basing Die Hard with a budget of $28 million in today's currency. That's about 70 million for a budget, or like 60 million or something for a budget. So that's like comparing Napoleon Dynamite to like Benchwarmers. Like, come on, man. Those budgets, it was like 10 grand for Napoleon Dynamite. And it was like 12 million for Benchwarmers. Like, apples to oranges there, my guy.
Yeah, I'm totally gonna have to agree with that because, like, yeah, Die Hard. Who plays the main character in Die Hard, right? Like, he's a top actor. Like we said, this was a low acting movie, so they're gonna have to suffer with with that budget and with the not having top actors. So that's why I gave mine a 0.75 because of the era and the budget and everything that surrounds this film.
I want to make a point. Die Hard's budget in today's economy was $75 million. $75 million. And Hamburger Hill's budget was like 17, I think. Yeah, 17 million in today's economy. So I could see why I give it the 0.5 because they put the effort into the sound effects because they want to make it a realistic thing. But music, no, it's going to stay at a 0.5.
All right. I'll appease the crowd and make it a 0.25. All right. We're good with that. It's been raised to a 0.25. It's just I'm sorry. It was taking my focus away not to laugh at how terrible the sound effects was. That's just how it goes.
Okay. All right, fair. But like I said, 1987, bro.
Animation and cinematography.
0.25.
0.5.
A 1.
All right, man. Josh, I gotta hear why you gave it a 1, my guy. I've got to hear why you gave it a 1.
1987, here we go again. Basically because, like we said, it was a low budget film and they had to work with what they had. That doesn't mean I'm right. And in fact, while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to drop it to a 0.5 because I was thinking for me, as an artist, not saying that I'm a movie artist, but as an artist, right? I'm looking at the backgrounds. I'm looking at what's going on at all moments. I don't know. It's more like I look at the whole picture, not just the people. What are they talking about? What are they saying? Stuff like that. I'm looking at everything. And as for everything, like, was correct with the times. 1960, everything was, even down to the canteens, all the way down to the uniforms and the patches, everything.
This film, mind you, I understand the budget, 6 million. It was very low, but I'm sorry. I feel when the Vietnamese man attacked that one soldier in the little hole, pushed him off, and then all of a sudden you just see this gun go after him, and it looks comical because he's staring like, laying back. All of a sudden, boom, 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 and it looks like someone took a firecracker and popped and like made Play-Doh with the remains. It was so bad. Like it was comical almost. Like when Doc was looking at that severed head or whatever, it looked like hamburger meat was used. It wasn't accurate. Also, I'm sorry, when they shot with the paint, with the blood on the leaves, where'd you get your ketchup? Like it was awful looking. The fireworks feeling of the special effects, like, come on, for 6 million, I understand your budget restrictions, but I can't. No, there was no good shot. Like they were so inconsistent with like their shots, even in the beginning when they were doing like director, and then they would show that wall in Vietnam where with all the names, but the camera was like this, moving up and down. It was like shaky cam. Like, come on, guys. They in 1987 they have those machines where you can actually just glide. Yeah, you can just glide with your camera. Like, come on, it's not that expensive to make.
And there we go. That's a lot of my points right there. The beginning sequence was a big one. Right at the start, they're showing you the beginning credits, right? Going across this Vietnamese wall. That shaky cam made no sense to me. It was up and down, up and down, up and down. They have stabilizers, stabilize the damn camera so we can see that wall. It's blurry, out of focus. It's distracting to the eye. There was no point to it. And just to give you a little reference on what Eli's talking about when it comes to this lovely Vietnamese soldier's head getting exploded, they're fighting, they're in the foxhole, and he pushes him off. Another American soldier comes by to help, takes his gun, points it at the Vietnamese soldier. Vietnamese soldier, all he does is look at him, takes a couple shots. The American soldier takes a couple shots, and it literally looked like a stuffed animal exploded in the foxhole. There was no effect to it. It was not a head being blown off. It was just stuffing flying everywhere. Yeah, to reference it, if you've ever seen The Office, it's when Michael blows Toby's head off in the movie that he makes, and he says, by far the most expensive part of the film. It's just multiple shots of Toby's head exploding. That's exactly to the T what it looks like in this film. I am so confused by this. They didn't even show any like blood or anything as this head blows up. It literally just looks like stuffing is going everywhere. It's just bad. There's quite a bit to talk about, but for this specific movie, I cannot go higher than a 0.5. I think I'm probably even being generous with a 0.5, but there's just so much shaky cam, so much. Well, I don't really mind shaky cam in intense situations, but they put it in the wrong spots. There just wasn't enough. It was bright, surprisingly, in a dark toned film. There was plenty of lighting, which most of the time in cinematics they try to darken the scene to darken the mood, but they didn't do that in this film. But there's just so much wrong that you can't justify anything higher than a 0.5.
I'm going to have to agree with you. My biggest thing that I was looking at was the accuracy of uniforms, the times, the vehicles they were using, the tanks, everything, because a lot of movies get that wrong. You know, like a lot of World War II movies are using Vietnam tanks that they used, you know, like it's crazy, and vice versa. And that's not how it was. But yeah, I totally agree, and that's exactly what I was gonna say when Toby's head got shut off. Shot off. That was complete. That was my complete like whole thought process on that. That was so horrible. I get that. I get that. But it was still like I don't know. For me, they could have used like a ballistic gel, and putting fake blood cartridges in it like they do nowadays, but because they had them back then, they just didn't do it. I don't know why, but I mean, I laughed at that part. I did. I seriously laughed. I was like, what the fuck is going on?
I ended up pausing the film, screaming at Eli, and said, "Hey man, come see this. This is like, what the fuck am I looking at?" And I'm like, "Okay, now just watch. Here we go. There it is. Watch it." And then we just burst out in fucking tears. It was just, oh man, so bad, but so great. So bad that it decreases the film's value, the rating system, but great enough that it gave you a part to laugh at.
Can we
in
also
a very
say
dramatic,
immediately after they
hurtful
did that
film.
shot, a Vietnamese man went for a shot and got shot in the head, and he sounded like he orgasmed. Like he just literally sounded like he was just coming like, ah.
That's absolute truth. And in that shot, they used the blood packet to burst out the back of the head. So why the fuck didn't they use it in the explosion of the other guy's head? I don't
In all
understand
honesty, I
it.
think the reason why is because it had to have gone this way. Whoever set that up, whoever was their what are they called? Special effects person. I'm pretty sure he got his ass fucking canned, but they didn't have enough film or money to refilm it. Because if you think about it, like they have all this dramatization, and people are you see bullets going into people and it's bleeding, right? But they don't have enough to blow up a head. Come on. That person, I'm pretty sure that guy got canned.
I probably have to agree with you on that. It was. I love how we're focusing so strongly on this head, but it was so noticeable that it just brought the value of the film down, which sucked because it could have been an amazing film. And I'm pretty sure that I haven't seen the remake, but I'm pretty sure that one has boosted this one even more. I would like to compare the two at some point, but for now I've only seen this one. But I'm pretty sure, I hope, that the remake has bumped it
They
up.
did. It's an
bit.
awesome film. I liked the newest one. It definitely, like, if we ever do come back to this, we should watch it together and do it again. But and compare the two, because I'm telling you, it's way better. And obviously they did it right. Like, I'm not saying that this film didn't do it right, but the cinematography was done right.
All right. Directing.
0.75 for me.
I gave it a 0.25.
I gave it a 0.5.
I think the director did his hardest on this one. Not saying I mean I'm not sure who it was. I didn't look into it, but I think that he did pretty well, because I can see the visualization that this director had and where he was going with it, because he wanted straight facts. He wanted to tell the truth of Vietnam, because of the way when this came out, people were still hating the Vietnam soldiers that went over, calling them baby killers and stuff. The way they were treated when all those soldiers came back from all the hippies and the liberals and all that stuff, and we weren't even supposed to be in this war. So I think he was just going with facts. I think that he was going with telling the truth, and that's why it wasn't such a great film, but it was good with true events.
I thought he did a good job in telling the story. It was a great story. It was perfectly well delivered. It just, there was so much that he could have improved. The filler could have been lessened. The story itself could have been heightened, so you're not focusing so much on all this filler trying to get past, them brushing their teeth. Again, it goes in with what I had said in plot. There's just so much there that really didn't need to be added to deliver this plot. And he definitely could have worked with his actors more, especially because they were all within the newer 0 to 2 film range, instead of hoping that they would match Weber's character, push them to make their own characters, push them to really shine and show why they want to be on screen, how they can be on screen, and what projects they can do in the future. But his direction was, he didn't push them enough to bring out their own characters. They relied too much on the one person who had multiple films under his belt compared to trying to break out and make their own characters. And that's partially our director's fault, just because it is up to them to basically make this film the way they want the film to be made. And you can't throw that all on the director, but a lot of it has to come from him. He has to get on him and say, this has to be your own. You have to do this. And I just feel like he didn't quite get his actors in that state of mind. There's also cinematics. He shouldn't have even let that head get on screen if it's not what he wanted. It could have been what he wanted. I don't know. But it's just some of these cinematics that went through probably shouldn't have. And that's on him, along with Sound of Music. Where's the sound? Where's the music? Where's the things to pull me in? Where's the acting? Where's the cinematics? Where's the music? Where's all the stuff that we need to pull us into the story to keep us interested, so we're not turning it off or we're buying this film after we see it in theaters? We need all these different... We need the dialogue, the music, the development, the acting. We need it all. And I feel like he just put in 50% of his power, 50% of what he could have done. And that's why I got the 0.5. It was just not enough to push a good story out. Plot's great, but the way it was delivered, not so much.
The director of this film, he had about 15 years of experience before this film came out. He started in the early 70s. And okay, I got to bring it up with everyone. Fortunate Son. Why did they use it? Why did they not try to use Fortunate Son, the song from 1969? That was basically like a prime song for the Vietnam War. Like, I feel like during that time in 1969, they probably would have heard it on some radio out there because it was a very prominent song. And I think the director just didn't want to. I didn't think he had the money for it, but I don't know. There were some decisions in like the cinematography, like Ben said, and the director did work with what he got, though. He had a $6 million budget to work with, a real big part of our history that no one else wanted to talk about. People wanted to just push to the side and say, oh, yep, we're good. We're good. We don't need to know about that. We're good. But this film showed a lot of good battle scenes. Like going up the hill, those are some of the best scenes you could have. And yes, these guys were inexperienced and you can feel it. And I wish the director actually did some work with them. But there's no excuse to what he did with poor choice on cinematography, sound, and he tried his best with the plot, but he had to fill a time frame. And I could see where he was going with trying to show everything, because 2 hours, you got to fill 2 hours. Like, you can't do an hour and a half film in his mind, I think, and justify the story. I think a war film, 2 hours is like minimum you have to do. So you got to show the nitty gritty of the brothels. You got to show the nitty gritty of small talk. You got to show all this stuff, but it wasn't really well put, in my opinion. I think the director could have done a different direction.
I'm totally down with the small talk of soldiers, getting together and really building that trust, because you need it. Even where I work, I have to have, I'm not a soldier by any means, but I still have to go out in public where it could be potentially dangerous. I have to know that officer next to me has my back if something goes down. And the only way to do that is small talk, some chatter, getting to know each other really well. I'm all for that. Go ahead and put that in the film, but don't focus so much on it that it takes away from the plot. That's all I'm saying. There was a lot of it. And they didn't need to show the brothel. They just didn't. They could have put camaraderie in a different way. They didn't need to go into the brothel and have this very small. It was like what, 3 minutes, 5 minutes scene, but it was enough that it took my focus away from what this film was trying to portray. I understand they were trying to show Adam and Dennis's camaraderie and how much they trusted each other, but it didn't need to be there at the brothel. Could have been in a tent playing cards or something. Something that two friends and soldiers would do together rather than going to a freaking brothel. I'm sure they did, but they didn't need to show it. That's all I'm saying. Camaraderie is great. Getting to know the small chatter, great, but too much focus on it brings it down.
I'm gonna have to disagree with some of that because yes, they did go to brothels, and I think that's what the director was trying to describe. He was describing everything that happened in Vietnam. Vietnamese women wanted to come. It's a status for them. If they marry an American, they have lots of money because the dollar value here in America is way more than what it is in Vietnamese, and it's all about status in a lot of Asian cultures when it comes to that. And there, if you notice what they were talking about in the brothel, it's like they're like, I come with you when the war's done. We just go, right? They wanted to be with the GIs. Now, whether they stayed with them or not once they got here in America, it didn't matter. They were here in America now. And I think that's what he was trying to expose and explain. So, yeah, maybe they didn't have to do it in the brothel or show, Vietnamese titties and and stuff like that. But it was, I think he's trying to get the depth and what really truly happened.
Which is understandable. Yeah, I get that. I didn't feel like it needed to be that specific. They could have gone to a bar or well, yeah. I get I get it. I get it. Attraction.
0.75.
0.25.
0.5. Eli, let's hear yours first since you're the lowest.
I'm not going to say that I'm not a big war buff. I do love my war films. I do love talking about it. For me, the Vietnam War wasn't like my all-time favorite thing to learn about in high school or college. It wasn't my favorite thing to learn about. I was more of a World War II kid or Revolutionary War or Civil War. But so coming into this, I was like, okay, it's the Vietnam War. It's a war that we lost. This is going to be rough. It's going to be showing a lot. It wasn't my cup of tea from the start. And when I got into the pacing of it, yeah, it was not my cup of tea. I enjoyed certain parts, but overall, from the get-go, I'm just not a big fan of the Vietnam War.
I had to take back and look at what I was actually watching. I love history. Vietnam, even though it was a war we shouldn't have been in, I still love learning about it. But putting in mind the way they delivered the acting, development, music, animation and cinematography, the directing, it was enough that there's no way I could justify a 1. I love the accuracy. I love the proper tanks, the guns, the napalming, the proper helicopters, all of it. I loved it. It was very accurate. But everything put into consideration, I did not give a 1 to anything in this entire film. None of it got a 1. So therefore, the attraction of this film, there was so much going on sideways that it just took my attention away from the actual plot, took my attention away from the story itself. And it was enough that, like I said, if this was not for the podcast, it probably would have been turned off within the first 30 minutes. There was nothing that pulled my attention at the beginning of this film.
I went with a 0.75 for attraction, just because for me, like I said, I'm a huge history buff, and especially about Vietnam. Like I love learning about all the wars and why, the political part of why too. Just because, yeah, it was like we've said before, it's a war we shouldn't have been in, but we did anyways, because America has to save the whole fucking world, and we don't know why, but it's that way. And then if we don't help them, they hate us. No matter what we do, it doesn't. It's a rock and a hard place or a double-edged sword, however you want to put that. My biggest thing about the attraction was, like Ben said, the accuracy, the truth that came out in this film. Not necessarily the cinematography and stuff like that. That'll, yeah. When it comes to that, like they could have done better, but who knows? Who knows? Who knows why they went that way? But the attraction itself was good enough for me because of the accuracy of it, the truth.
Dialogue.
I went with a 0.5.
I went with a 0.5.
Look at that, another one with all round 0.5s. Let's go ahead and start this then. Let's see. Well, dialogue had a lot. There wasn't anything that really stuck out to me except for Dennis's final monologue before his death. That one was long. I didn't write it down. It was come to Jesus kind of heart-wrenching monologue that I can't deliver properly, so I did not write it down. That is one thing that I would say look up. Sergeant Dennis monologue in 1987 film Hamburger Hill. It is worth listening to. It's a strong quote. It resonates and it hits just how fragile humanity really is. There's also the recording given by one of the private's girlfriends where he ends up with he gets a tape from her in the mail. He listens to it and it's her telling him how much she loves him and how proud of him she is of what he's doing and how she knows that his brothers in arms have his back, and it's gut-wrenching to hear because there are so many people that hated the vets that came back from the Vietnam War. It hurts to hear and see how these vets were treated and still are to this day. Some of them are still treated terribly. A lot of them are. And even though we shouldn't have been there, they were still there. They were fighting for America. Not necessarily in a good way. It was more because Eisenhower wanted a freaking production of helicopters like crazy. That was a huge factor into why we went to Vietnam and Korean wars. But just listening to that recording and the way that all of the platoon heard this recording as she's saying, "We love you. I hope you get back. I'm gonna wait for you." It really tugged at the heart because not a lot of the soldiers that came back got that love, got that feeling of I did this for my country, and they came back with a bunch of people who hated them, which hurts. Then there was the freaking radio broadcast from the Vietnamese side that said that all the traitors that are helping, that the Americans are helping, are all going to die, so they should just give up and side with us instead of the Americans. Like it was cringy, creepy, hurtful. And I got to say, if I was a Vietnamese citizen and heard that coming from the other side, it would kind of make me want to double think and think of, should I be on this side or should I go across the border? You know, go to the other side, go to my country, not where I'm at, but the Viet Cong. That broadcast, I got chills when I was listening to that. They turned it off because it was it was too much for them to even hear. There was a lot in this, but there was also not enough to really bring it up to a 1. It just didn't have anything that, like my other films, that 1911 had so many quotes in it that I could pull and really connect with. This one just had few brief things that didn't have a strong quote with it, but it had a good reaction with it. 1917 had the quote and the strong reaction that came with it. It's powerful, but not powerful enough to bring it higher than a 0.5.
So the dialogue in this was very raw. You could feel the interactions between the soldiers in like the brothels, and when Doc was talking to one of the other guys, I think it was Alphabet who he was talking to, because they were like just back and forth, a little bickering, and then Alphabet's like, "That's bullshit," and all of a sudden you just see Doc slug him in the face. And he's like, "My name is not Alphabet. It's Vincent." And then you just like hear Doc just like slugging along, going, "Yeah, your name's Vincent." And you felt that through the whole film, where it's like some of the dialogue was kind of muffled in throughout, because it sounded like it was the inexperience of the actors giving the lines. So overall, I give it a 0.5. It was not the worst, but it wasn't like top tier, like Ben was saying about like 1917, like some other films we've seen, like some anime films like Can I Eat Your Pancreas and other films. They had just stronger dialogue overall. This one was just subpar.
I'm gonna have to agree with both of you. That's probably where we all got 0.5. But I thought it was, until the action was happening, the dialogue was quiet. The when every time they talked or something like that, if they weren't arguing, it was pretty quiet. So that's kind of what got me. But the quotes were, if you notice, they were all the quotes that came up on the screen and stuff. They were all true quotes. Some of the things that Doc and some of the things that the sergeants were saying, they were all quoted by the actual soldiers, by actual sergeants and stuff. That's what really got me. I loved it. Like I said, accuracy on history. That's why I like this movie so much, just because of the accuracy. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to go, and then 0.5.
Scenery.
Scenery for me is a 1, and I'm going to keep it at a 1.
I gave Scenery a 0.5.
I gave it a 0.75.
I'm going to have to say a 1, because it went all the way from the time that they were there, all the way to the time that the war, or well, the Battle of Hamburger Hill ended, right? It was actually very, like, obviously it wasn't like there wasn't different scenery. It was the jungle, but it was an accurate jungle, and that's what was amazing. There was the rain, the accuracy of how, like, the tropic thunder, right? It was awesome. And I have to say, like, I have to go back with the accuracy of the tanks, the accuracy of the vehicles, the trucks, the jeeps they used. Everything was accurate. That's why I gave scenery, because when you saw the phantoms flying over, they were actual filmed. It wasn't like a little toy going across the scene. It was an accurate, and it was everything about it was correct. I liked it. So the scenery was colorful, it was bright, like you guys were saying. It wasn't like they didn't darken the mood, they didn't darken the scene, the scenery, because it was a bright, colorful jungle.
Listening to you, I have to agree. I'm going to bring my 0.75 up to a 1, because the jungle itself was luscious. It was green. It was gorgeous. When they're trudging through the mud, it's trudging through the mud. It was not just some soundstage. They were out trudging through this actual mud. When they were filling the mud bags, they were covered in this the mud they were putting into the sandbags. The foxholes, they were the only thing that would, yeah, you can't I can't think of a reason why I docked it. I don't even have anything negative in my scenery thing. So I don't know why I docked it, but the accuracy of the vehicles, the accuracy of the guns, the helicopters, the jets flying over, the bombarding of napalm all throughout the jungle areas, white phosphorus, the helicopters flying over, gunning down the enemies, even though they're trying to tell them, no, those are friendlies, those are friendlies, those are friendlies. They can't get them to stop firing on the friendlies. Everything was accurate. The scenery was gorgeous, and I'm trying to figure out why I had put a 0.75, and I can't find it. I don't know where I wrote anything negative unless it was a thought in my head and I forgot to put it down. But listening to Josh and the way that he had described this and then thinking back on the film, it was a very strong, there was quite a bit to justify a 1. It was very accurate, very green, very luscious. The rivers were blue. The sky was it did have gray hues. It wasn't dark, but it did have gray hues during some very intense moments, but that is just accurate. It's just what it was. It was a gorgeous forestry, but there was so much going on that it was a gray area. I don't Like I said, I'm not sure why, but I can't remember the reason and it's not written in my notes, so I'm going to raise it to a 1.
I'd have to agree with both of you. I changed mine to a 1 as well. I looked up where this was shot. This was shot in the Philippines. So the fact that they got to a location that could be as accurate as they could is just outstanding by itself. Because just having the proper forestry, proper jungle setting for this type of film just makes it better. Like you could have done this in a studio or something, or gone to a different area in like South America or something, but it wouldn't have given you the same feeling. So the way they chose the jungle was a very smart decision on their part. And I really did like the realism of and the accuracy of the weaponry and the tanks, like you guys have both said. And overall, the 1 is well deserved for giving the best representation of what this whole battle was.
Yeah, like I said, obviously they couldn't film in Vietnam because we're still not welcome, even to this day, really. They don't like us unless you're doing a mail order bride or some shit. But there's still animosity towards it. So that's why they did it in the Philippines. But the Philippines are so close that it really like all the vegetation is correct. It's still the same tropic area. Yeah, so
Recommend.
I went with a 1 just because the accuracy of the history.
I went with a 0.5.
I also went with a 0.5.
I went with a 1 because of obviously the history. So the accuracy of the jungle, the accuracy of the history, the accuracy of the vehicles. I looked at it that way. I didn't look at it to be not necessarily entertained, but knowledge in this movie. That's why I went with it.
I looked at it, and when I saw realistic, I was anticipating something a little. I wasn't expecting the 45-minute opener. I was not expecting it taking that long to get to combat to that degree. The pacing was not the greatest. Cinematography for me, no. Straight fire, no. I'm sorry, that was bad. But like you said, Josh, the realism and the accuracy of it and the history behind it, that's why I can give it the 0.5, because it does tell a really hard story. Executed to me, not the greatest, but it is a hard story to do. And I give a recommendation to people who want to see the history side of it.
I gotta agree with you both. My main reason for a 0.5 is that, like you said, 45 minutes of just filler to get you to the point where combat is initiated. It's so much that takes away from the main plot that your focus leaves. And again, I have to emphasize, had I not done this for the podcast, it would have been turned off. It just wasn't enough excitement at the beginning or attraction at the beginning to pull me into the story. But yes, the accuracy, it had that defining factor of when battle started, it showed how intense and strong it showed how intense this story truly was, how intense this battle truly was. It's just that long 45 minutes is so hard to just get past, especially when the movie is only 2 hours long. It almost took an entire half of the film to really pull you into the story, and that hurts. Any film, that hurts. That's what's going to get people to turn it off. If you're not hooked within the first 10 minutes of a film, most people turn it off. Even sooner for people with less of an attention span. So I like true to event stories, and this was, but it was too true in the fact that he wanted to fit everything, so he put the brothel in, he put the camaraderie in, and it filled up half of the film time, which was too much.
I'll have to agree with you. The 45 minutes was tough, but I think he was trying to portray with the brothels and the brushing of the teeth and all that stuff and the paperwork that they had to fill out, because that's what really happened. They were not expected to live. Period. All the benefits needed to go to their loved ones, so that's why it was important in such a way. And like I said, he was going for accuracy and truth because nobody was telling the truth back in that time of what happened in the Vietnam, because nobody wanted to fucking hear it because we weren't supposed to be there. And he made a film that told the truth. So, and I think that's why people I don't know. I mean, he made a lot of money off of it, so obviously people wanted to know. And to just add a couple of facts here, I just wanted everybody to know that 2 million civilians died on both sides, North and South Vietnam, right? 1.1 million Viet Cong and North Vietnamese fighters died. 200,000 South Vietnamese soldiers died, and then 58,220 died. That's not including all the POWs. So we found that there was 780 people or soldiers of the American side had become POWs, and the POWs back in Asian countries back in World War II, outrageously badly tortured. I would rather be in a German camp than any kind of Asian camp, because I'll tell you what, they used to do all kinds of tortures that were against the Geneva Geneva Convention. Against the Geneva Convention. 114 were killed during that were in captivity during the war. Then over 400 died after we left. People were left in POW camps after we left, which is another against the Geneva Convention. Because once you have a POW, you're supposed to release them after the war, after the battles. And then on top of that, there have been reports of people actually hiding still in the tunnels. Some of the Viet Cong still in the tunnels, thinking there was the war was still going on up to 2016. That is a long ass time being in the tunnel, hiding from the enemy when the enemy's not even there anymore. Can you believe that? There's been POWs that have been found when we went back to historical filmings and stuff like that, getting the proof of like what was going on in Vietnam. We actually found POW camps that are still active today. Still had some people until we released them back in 2012.
Damn, some realistic facts coming at you. I didn't even look at realistic facts after watching this film, and it's just crazy. The more you know, man, the more you know. That's can't believe there's still fucking POW camps. That's just outrageous.
That's fucking wild to think that we as an American institution, like an American country, have left people like that. It's just awful to think about that we still had people over there. And yeah, the most famous POW that's now is John McCain. He came out from that and he was insane, but people voted for him, and you could see the tragedy of it just through him a little bit and all the others that came back. It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, from when the war ended, quote unquote, 1972, until now, how many years is that? That's over 60 years, something like that, right? So, I mean, you think about it, 2016, that's a long time being in a POW camp. Could you imagine? And then not including the people, some of the soldiers that came back to America, and then they've been so disrespected that they're like, fuck it, going back to Vietnam. I'm gonna go get myself a woman. We're gonna live there. A lot of them did that. Think about it.
Yeah, man. Fucking wild. Fucking wild. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank Josh for coming on this show with us today.
Yeah, dude, it was nice. I love this. I am one of the biggest fans of you guys' the podcast. I literally cannot wait. I'm always anxious, and I'm always telling Ben, what the hell, bro? When am I gonna expect the next one, the next one, and the next one? I give him shit all day, every day.
We do truly appreciate you coming on, Josh. As we wrap up this week's episode of Nerd Taku Podcast, I'd like to talk about next week's episode. We are going to be reviewing the 2012 action film Bourne Legacy. Ben, this trailer left a lot of questions. I don't know what's happening. It looks like Jeremy Renner is a new agent. I don't know where Matt Damon is. It looks like it's a different story. I'm kind of confused. I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to give this a 6.5, and I'm hoping it gets better.
Man, I don't know how to feel about this one because I grew up with the other Bournes, and without Jason being in the story, I just don't feel like it's going to be Bourne. It's just an odd concept. I want to give it the benefit of the doubt. I want it to be good. I love Bourne. I love the action series. I love the fights and the gun fights and all that, but I just don't know how it's going to be. So I'm going to give it a 6.5 because the trailer doesn't really give me much excitement. I hope I'm proven wrong, but we'll just have to see.
As we wrap up this week's episode of Nerd Taku Podcast, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into this week. If you'd like to follow us, we're on Instagram, Threads, and Twitter at nerd_taku_podcast. You can find our show on all major streaming platforms, and you can find us on YouTube under Kingdom Note Studios. My name is Eli.
I'm Ben.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Have a great week.
Have a great one.